Hi, Kings fans, and welcome back to the Frozen Crown. And this is our Week 2 review, where we're going to take a look at a pivotal road trip and how that finished. We had 4 games this week, all of which are road games, and ended up finishing the road trip 3-2 with the inclusion of a Minnesota victory this past weekend. But I'll go ahead and get started by talking about how we did with Detroit to start. We've got 4 games to cover this week, and then we'll summarize and look ahead towards week number 3. To start with the Detroit game against the Red Wings, we did win in overtime 5-4. So another 1-goal game for the Kings. That'll be a bit of a theme here. One thing I noted right off the bat, I think, just by looking at the score sheet and the box score, you can see that our top guys produced. Mainly the first line and Danault and Moore. Obviously, those two really hooked up for the overtime winner and were pivotal in the third period. But the main thing to me is that Arvidsson still, at this point in time, looked out of sync. He's still recovering from that injury and was a really invisible out there as far as on that second line. Danault and Moore carried it, but he, looking back to last year, he really was the guy on that second line. So we need him to have more offense. The other guys, the other big names carried this game, but we need him to have more offense. Another thing I noticed on the defensive side, I saw that Durzi and Roy were leaned on a lot. When the Kings were defending in the third period against the Red Wings when they had their goalie pulled, these were the guys on the ice for most of the time when the goalie was pulled. I thought that was interesting. You might see somebody like Doughty and Edler out there more often in this situation, but it shows a lot of confidence and maybe just a test out of Todd McLellan to see what these guys can do. Both of them I thought performed well, and it's just nice to see that McLellan is giving these guys an opportunity. One thing that I think is becoming a theme here is that we are struggling to bury teams. So we'll be up, we'll be leading, and then we can't put a team in the ground. We can't put that nail in the coffin. Maybe find that last goal or just defensively shut it down and just run out the clock. We're still letting teams in. We saw it with Minnesota. We had a great lead against them. We see it here with Detroit. We had a great lead against them. They ended up coming back in overtime. We did finish the job, so I was glad to see some resilience there. But the key thing, obviously, you can look at Arvidsson. He had an opportunity for an empty net goal all by himself. Dylan Larkin does make a good play defensively to stop that goal, but I mean, we have to bury teams. You got to bury that puck. You got to score that. Arvidsson already having a bad game, a bad start to the season, and this was just like capping it off for me. I'm like, dude, you have to put that in. We can't afford to be giving up points like this. So we did give a point to Detroit. We may have lost that game in overtime. It very easily could have gone the other way, but it's unnecessary because we need to bury these teams. Another thing here is Fiala takes another horrible penalty. So we saw it in the Vegas game, the first game of the season, where he took a very bad penalty, and then very undisciplined, unnecessary. He retaliates again here. The Kings are on the power play when he takes this penalty. I don't know. He and another guy were chirping or pushing and shoving against each other, and he just unnecessarily interferes and checks with some Detroit guy and mitigates the power play, and loses all momentum and pretty much costs us a lot of momentum and a lot of opportunities that we could have had to bury these teams. So I don't know how much longer Todd McLellan. I certainly, as a coach, wouldn't have much patience for this. I don't know how much longer Todd McLellan will put up with this. But we cannot have. I mean, we don't pay him this much money to be in the box, and basically he's the other team's best penalty killer at this point. He's killing penalties single-handedly by taking these bad penalties, and he's going to start getting a reputation as a guy who, oh yeah, if you're on the PK, he's going to be out there on the power play. Just chip on him a little bit and start to chirp him, and then he'll get a penalty against you. So I don't want him having that reputation. I don't want to see him in the box. It's starting to become a theme early. This was game number 4, I believe, of the season, and he already had taken 2 bad penalties at this point. So he's at a 50% rate of like really bad momentum killing penalties. So we need to see him clean this up, and I would not be opposed to seeing Todd McLellan like bench him in another situation where he were to get this kind of a bad penalty again if he did. We win that game, and then on a back-to-back night, we go and we play against Nashville. So this is a game where we saw Gabe Velarde carry us, and I think that was evident not only through his goal and his assist to Roy, but also in the shootout. He carried the team there. He was the only guy to score in the entire shootout. I thought that, you know, on a scoring level, we need guys to be, in on the score sheet, but his consistency is what really is nice about Velarde here. Whether it be consistently scoring, from a shootout, from an assist standpoint, he's offensively very consistent. He's able to create chances. He's not just a scorer guy. Like you see a guy like Kempe, he's probably just a scorer, and he may not necessarily be like a shootout specialist. Like Kopitar is not really a shootout specialist. But Velarde can do it all, man. He can score a goal, he can assist, he can win the shootout. He does it all. One thing that really stuck out to me about Velarde was after he scored the shootout shot, he's sitting on the bench and he's like up really intensely watching to see if Peterson makes this next save, because that would make them win that game. And McClellan's like trying to talk to him and pat him on the shoulder and tell him good job and stuff. And he's just like laser focused. Like he doesn't necessarily care about getting the praise from the coach at that point. He just wants to make sure that the Kings win. And he's so laser focused on winning. And I love that about him, is he's not there to, turn around and talk to the coach and be like, oh yeah, tell me how great I am. He wants to see the boys win. He wants to see the team do well. So that was very promising to see that. I love that attitude out of him. I also like the effort here out of the Kings, considering it was on the second half of a back-to-back. It's early in the season, so we saw like Seattle play us very well in the second half of back-to-back, and we played well here in the second half of a back-to-back. It seems like early in the season, those kind of opportunities don't really hurt the teams as much. They're still fresh. Maybe later in the year, it'd be harder to play a back-to-back game, but I really did see good effort from guys, even though we were probably tired after playing an overtime game last game and a shootout game this game. So I did like the effort. Specifically in the third period, we did have a comeback here. This was the best period of the season. Still to this day, even after all these other games against Pittsburgh and Washington too, the third period was the best period of the season. Though we tend to have a lot of up and downs throughout just from one period to the next with the Kings, and that's something we need to clean up. But we certainly had a good third period, and I thought Matt Roy, who was in the doghouse for us last week, he's not in the doghouse this week. Spoiler alert. But he did a good job bouncing back. He's involving himself more in the offensive zone. I think he's been tasked by Kings coaching to do that. But he scored a great pivotal goal to get us into overtime and eventually get us this shootout win. So I was really happy to see Matt Roy bounce back. I thought that early he struggled as he's getting used to his new teammates, but this was kind of his like coming out or bouncing back party for Matt Roy. Now we'll go on to the biggest stinker of the road trip, and that is the Pittsburgh loss. So when we lose here against Pittsburgh, the first thing that comes to mind is this first period. I see a lot of analysts that were going crazy about this first period. Garrett Stoll called it the best period the Kings played all season. I honestly don't know why he thinks that. If it's just from looking at the shots on goal, yeah, okay, the shots on goal were there, but to me, those don't matter. If we don't have the scoring chances and they're not quality, I don't care about the shots on goal. I want to see quality chances, and if you have high shots on goal, but there's no screens, there's no like tip-ins, no front net presence, it doesn't really matter. You can either be a high-skilled team that creates a lot of chances off the rush and gets a lot of high-scoring chances that way, and you get shot volume from like having just a lot of good offense, or you can be a team that just capitalizes off of loose pucks and rebounds and tip-ins and a lot of shot volume. But we don't have the front net presence to be that team. So our shots are there, but they're not really scoring chances. I thought Peterson had a really bad game this game. Early on, a lot of those goals I would say weren't necessarily his fault, but there was one where he caught it and he thought he had it for like 5 seconds. He's just sitting there thinking he has it. And the puck squirts off to his right and ends up getting batted in. But, we had, I think, 3 goals against in the first period. I do agree with the decision to pull Peterson. Goaltending in general has not been good this season at all for the Kings. And this was, hopefully a way to reward Peterson for a good win against Nashville. and giving him an opportunity to kind of take that number one spot, and he did not step up to the plate. Speaking of not stepping up to the plate, I saw the first line really struggling here, and especially, when we're playing against the best teams in the league, which I would say Pittsburgh is definitely up there. They were an impressive team this year. They're doing well. We need our best guys to step up. It's not, great if they're a point per game player, but they beat up on the teams that suck, and then they can't step up against the teams that are good. And those points don't really matter as much to me. So the fourth line ended up actually getting more minutes than the first line this game. I think that's just a way for Todd McClellan to kind of, once the game's kind of obviously out of reach, then your minutes are going to change a little bit, and you'll kind of stretch out the lines evenly. But we need more out of that first line. We're paying them so much money, and have high expectations. We've got the captain on that first line. We need them to step up, and that's where the leadership standpoint comes in. For me, leadership-wise, as a captain, Kopitar needs to show a little more drive and a little more compete. Same with our other guys like Doughty. Between him and Doughty, they're making $21 million, and we need those guys to step up. Even if it's not, like, obviously we're down by 6 goals in the third period, that's not going to be something where leadership's going to come back and score 6 goals, but it could be something where leadership steps up and really at least maybe makes one nice play to score a goal to, like, prove to the team, like, hey, we still fight even when we're down, So that's, to me, where I'd like to see some improvement leadership-wise. But against these better teams, we're going to need to just play better as a team overall. We proved that we're not necessarily ready for these elite teams to take on these elite teams. Lastly, the last game we had was against Washington. Another game where we had the lead and the other team comes back. Unlike the Detroit game, we ended up losing this game. So we still are struggling to bury a team. I actually thought that up until the John Carlson goal, Quick was having a very good game. He looked sharp. He looked very composed, and, like, when he comes over, sliding over to make saves, a lot of times he can be, like, sprawling out of control, but he comes over and he seems very upright and compact, but yet taking up space. So he's no real holes, unnecessarily holes, and no real flailing about like he can do. So I thought he actually looked pretty good. The goal that ended up coming off the wraparound wasn't really his fault, but the John Carlson goal was certainly something that we needed to have him save. So goaltending still struggling, but Quick actually showed a lot of promise this game. I thought that he was well on his way to a great game, actually, before that like third period happened. And finally, Victor Arvidsson comes out, and he steps up and is our best player this game. Hands down the best player. He's in on, I believe, all of our goals for this game, scoring 1 and assisting on 2, and really making a lot of other plays, not just with those goals, but other plays too. I think that he really showed what he needed to show earlier this season. I can understand with the injury and things taking him a while to warm back up, so hopefully this is the Arvidsson we'll get for the rest of the season, because we need him on that second line. And again, we need the leadership to step in. So I think that that's kind of early on a bit of a theme where maybe when the team's scoring a lot, then that first line is involved. But when the team is having droughts and having issues scoring, the big guys aren't involved. So that's another takeaway, similar to the last game, but we need to have our big guys step up. So a summary of all of the games that we saw. The first thing, when you look at the goals against, it's just evident to me that our goaltending and defense is still subpar. We have young defenders in there who are getting used to the minutes, Brant Clark specifically. But, guys like Peterson and Quick have been in the league for a while. They're making the second most in the NHL as far as goaltending goes, and neither of them have a save percentage above 900. So, to me, it's goaltending more than defense, but team defensive-wise, specifically with our defensive pairs, we need to get better. But we're still one of the worst teams in the league as far as goals against. So we'll look to see if that can improve coming towards next week. But this has to be the number one thing to address for the Kings coaching staff. The other thing is 1-goal victory margins. We have not won a game where we have won by more than 1 goal. And when we lose games, we get blown out. So we need to be able to bury a team. As I mentioned, against the teams like Washington and Detroit, we need to be able to win these games in regulation versus overtime, or just not lose them with a third period lead. Next, on the power play, we're 2 for 19 this week. So almost 20 attempts, and we're about 10%. The one thing that sticks out to me on the power play is our left side, which is Kopitar's side, is very weak. It's mainly because he's not really, he's a pass first kind of guy. He's not really a shooter, but his handedness on that side is kind of handcuffing him or making it harder for him to get shots on net. He's a left-handed guy on the left side. If you know anything about taking a one-timer, it's easier to take a one-timer on your offhand side. So if I'm a left-hander and the puck is coming from my right, that means that my non-dominant hand is the one that's kind of receiving the puck first, and then my dominant hand is getting it to me on my left. So it takes longer to get into a shot position as it goes all the way across my body, and I have to shoot with my body like against the flow, as opposed to if I was shooting on the opposite side, like when you see Kempe, he's set up for those one-timers. Same with Ovechkin. He's on that left side. He's kind of like the guy known for those one-timers. He shoots on the left-hand side as a right-handed shot. So we kind of have a one-dimensional power play at this point. I think our power play entries are much better with the addition of Fiala, but still having a guy like Kopitar at the point who's more of a passer than a shooter, that situation, that deployment doesn't suit him, but also his shot, his handedness does not help him. A guy like Velarde is right-handed. I could totally see him in that situation. I think he has an underrated shot, and Kopitar's a big body. He could be in the front net. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I just would like to see something else on that left side to make us a little more of a threat from either side, so that way when Doughty passes it to his right or to his left, being that power play quarterback, there's always a bit of a threat to shoot it. Right now, I think teams don't fear Kopitar on that power play. All in all, though, we did have a 3-2 record on the road trip. All of our wins were kind of gritty wins that we squeaked out. But anytime you can finish the road trip with a victory or with a winning record, that's considered a success. So I mentioned at the beginning of the week that we would have a pivotal, already a very key road trip here. I think that the guys certainly looked like they started to gel a little bit more, especially that second line. Arvidsson started to really come into his own and find his way. Losing Iafallo hurt. I think that's probably the biggest loss this week was having him get injured, as he was one of our key performers last week. But overall, it was a successful road trip, and looking forward to see how the Kings do with his homestand against some good teams coming up. We're going to look at next our key performers, and then we'll look at the people in the doghouse. So for key performers, we're going to start off by looking at Gabe Vilardi again. I would say not as explosive of a week offensively as week number 1 was, considering he had 2 goals and 1 assist in 4 games. But he has a lot of things that he brings to the team outside of just the offense. And in this week's video review, we're going to look at that. But especially given the people he's playing with now, he lost Iafallo on his wing, who I thought was really the guy who helped him a lot with the last week. He lost Iafallo, and he has Kaliev replacing him, which is not a good replacement. But he still was the guy for especially that Nashville game. He's the reason we won that Nashville game. Next is Roy. He had 2 goals this week, and a lot of block shots too. So he was called on, like I said, on a lot of third period, empty net pulled for the other team. Third period, needing to score a goal, he stepped up. Just kind of stepped up to the plate in a lot of clutch situations, and he's doing it from all sides of the game. So a lot of shots on net, especially for a defenseman. He's averaging 3 shots a game and 10 blocks too, scoring a couple goals. He was kind of everywhere for the Kings this week. Another guy I want to look at is Trevor Moore. So in the games when Arvidsson was struggling, which is every game except for the last one, he was able to provide offense, and I love his motor. He has probably the best motor on the team. Game in and game out, always hustling, always providing pressure, great penalty killer. And I just love to see guys like this who maybe aren't the most talented, but they create goals and they create offense through their effort. So a lot of shots on goal for him and a lot of assists. He can certainly score too, but he helped set up plays for other people this week. And the last guy, I think a lot of Kings fans don't really care for him, but I like Brendan Lemieux. I like his energy that he provides. I think that he brings a bit of sandpaper to the Kings where, I mean, when your captain's Kopitar, he's like the least sandpaper guy, especially given his frame and how big he is. He's a pretty soft guy. I think that the Kings need to have guys like this in their lineup, but Lemieux can contribute offensively. He set up Roy for a nice goal, and he's also a big part of the forecheck on those games with the fourth line needing to create some energy. So he had 9 hits, and I think he only played 3 games because Grundstrom came in for 1. So 3 hits a game, 9 shots as well, and assisted on a really big goal for the comeback in Nashville. So he is a key performer for me, and that's more just based on expectations and deployment. If he got more minutes, I think he'd get more points. But he's a big part of that Nashville win for sure. Now in our doghouse, we have to look first at Victor Arvidsson. And I will not allow recency bias to skew my opinion of him. He had a great game against Washington, and I will not take that away from him. He was certainly the best player on the ice for that one game, but this whole week was 4 games. And I talked about with the Detroit game how he probably could have sealed the deal for us, and he failed to. And he also had a lot of opportunities to play well with players who were doing well. Danault and Moore had good weeks this week, but he did not. So I want to see more out of him. He needs to bring games like the Washington game more consistently, and I believe that he will. I think that he just struggled to kind of get up to the speed of the game coming back from that injury. He wasn't available, I think, during all of training camp. So he's still in the doghouse for me. He's the only one who was in the doghouse last week and this week because he's just failing to make the offense happen. And he's not a guy that's contributing defensively if the offense isn't there. So I need to see more out of him. He's still in the doghouse. The next guy is Quinton Byfield. With how much we leaned on that third line through week 1, losing Iafallo, we would expect a guy like him to step up and produce a little more offensively. And he had a secondary assist on Gabe Vilardi's goal against Nashville, I believe. So that's, not really creating a whole lot of offense. We will go into, on our video review, we will go into things with Byfield. He was a -4, and we'll look at one particular shift where he really struggled to break it out in a key time of the game against Washington. But only getting 1 shot. He played all 4 games. He only got 1 shot, 1 secondary assist. We need him. I think we're going to go towards more like a top 9 forward group this year. We need him to be a bigger piece of that if he wants to stay in the NHL. And I think that he's ready to go to the AHL from what I've seen. But I want to see more out of Byfield to get him out of the doghouse. Right now, he's not playing like a third-line center in the NHL. And lastly is Arthur Kaliyev. So with the injury to Iafallo was a huge opportunity for Kaliyev. I don't think he fits in well on that 4th line. I don't think that he has a skill set for the 4th line. He's not a fast skater who can get in on the forecheck. He doesn't like to, cruise and bruise and crash and bash in the offensive zone. He's not like that. He's a great sniper, and I think he's got a good hockey IQ for offensive, scoring chances. But he was given an opportunity to step in on one of the best third lines, really in the NHL. I think he was given an opportunity to step in for Iafallo, and he really failed to produce many opportunities. He got 1 primary assist on the Vilardi goal, which was a good opportunity that he created. But given the opportunity he was given, I would like to see him really take that and run with it, as he is not a 4th line player. So he kind of squandered that opportunity, in my opinion. I think that I wouldn't mind seeing him go back to the 4th line and someone else getting a shot on that 3rd line. But we need to see a guy like Kaliyev produce by scoring because he's not going to produce in other ways. Now to preview week number 3 in a big homestand against some very good teams. So I think that there's a good case to be made for 2 of these teams to be cup contenders this year. And I think Winnipeg is still an underrated team who will compete in the West, and we might be fighting for a wild card spot with this team, with Winnipeg here towards the end of the season. So we'll start things off on Tuesday against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They're a middle-of-the-pack team this year so far. I think they're 3-3. So it's been interesting to see them struggle out of the gate as they were, perennial like cup contenders. But I think that we will still see a very good team on Tuesday. So I'll be happy to see this test. We should see Quick get the start, but this is kind of the game for me that's going to be the one I'm going to keep the biggest eye on. So Tampa Bay is a great team. I'd love to see the Kings playing against the best teams in the league and see how they do. Next, they'll play against Winnipeg on Thursday. Again, this towards the end of the season. If we're fighting for them for playoffs, we might really want these points. So I don't want to see this game go to overtime. I'd like to see the Kings win in regulation. You're at home. You're needing to get back on track. I think this is a big game that towards the end of the season we might see this game be more important. We can look back on this game. And then lastly, against Toronto on Saturday. So Toronto, a very high-scoring offensive team. This is going to be the test for the defense. I know that Drew Doughty always likes to step up against Toronto. I think he's from that area or something. So I'd like to see him have a good game, and I think that this is going to be the biggest test so far this year for our defense and for our goaltending. So it'll be interesting to see. I would imagine we'll have one game for Quick and one game for Peterson in this mix, and then maybe Tuesday's Quick, Thursday's Peterson, and then come Saturday we'll see who played better out of those two, and we'll see who plays against Toronto. But that's what I'm going to be looking for is defense and goaltending against these good teams. So thanks for checking out this week's video review. We'll be following the Los Angeles Kings all season long, week by week, breaking down games every week, and also doing individual analysis of performances by key players throughout the season in our video breakdowns. If you enjoy this style of content, please make sure to like and subscribe and follow us all season long as we break down our favorite Los Angeles Kings. Thank you.